Hi, this isn't a wig. Stop asking. Andrew. And this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're talking about someone who ain't nobody asking for, but I like to be thorough, so you're welcome. It's New Adventures of He-Man Mara, which is sort of the spin-off series of the original Masters of the Universe cartoon. It is not well liked, either in the He-Man community or not, but it happened. As a bit of a primer, of course, Masters of the Universe was, one of the big three of the early and mid 80s. But much like Transformers and G.I. Joe, after the movie, death knell. The line by 1987 was essentially dead. Retailers were not buying up stock. The line was just struggling. Sales were down. So rather than take a pretty hearty break like they tended to beyond this point, they decided to just barrel ahead and go, release a brand new He-Man, a new Adventures of He-Man, if you will. Both in a new toy line that did not scale with the original line and a new cartoon that did not look like the original cartoon. The New Adventures of He-Man not only looked different, but it had a completely different storyline where He-Man, on the advice of the Sorceress, just took off into space. His spaceship was called the Starship Eternia as an homage to his home planet, but most of the story took place around a planet called Primus, which was being invaded by mutants, who Skeletor had sort of shacked up with, Techno-Skeletor, no less. And it kind of formed a new kind of trinity of heroes, new side characters, a whole new scenario, with some homages to the original series, which we'll come back to. But I gotta tell you, ain't nobody was ready for this. And it was also too soon. The original Bodies was still warm. Nobody wanted this. I still remember going into stores and just being like, why? I liked Optic because I was a big Eyeball fan, but everything else was just weird and odd and not enjoyable. A company called Jetlag was the one who produced the cartoon. It was a rough watch, but admittedly, if you sit down and get through the whole thing, it's not bad. It comes together near the end, and again, by the end of it, you kind of want to see what happened in season 2, which, according to the showrunners, was potentially really cool. Now we get to Mara, and I gotta tell you, I don't dislike anyone. I am generally pretty optimistic, despite having a very sarcastic personality, but this woman was a personal attack. And this is where I'm going to get a little, brave but vulnerable for the channel. I am a fan of Teela. I was a fan of her from the original concept, from the mini-comics, all throughout the cartoon. And likewise, my mother, when telling me that I was adopted, sort of looked at Teela and said, this is a great example. This is something that you can glom onto and understand your situation. So me and Teela are tight. And so to go to New Adventures of He-Man and learn that He-Man was just shacking up with some, mousy brunette named Mara, personal attack. Teela also did make an appearance in the cartoon in one singular episode that a lot of fans do want that look for in action figure form. I'm not covering her separately. We're just talking about today. They made a point in the episode to really kind of hammer home that, He-Man and Teela were very platonic and essentially war buds. She was much more a boisterous warrior, very akin to, Big Barda from DC Comics. Mara, being a sucky person, was insecure and jealous, but of course He-Man had to kind of talk her down by the end, being like, we're just friends. I like you because you're blah, blah. As big a hater as I am of the character, who admittedly did grow on me by the end, her toy is very interesting because it's almost a tale of two origins smashing together. The general rule of thumb for any toy line from conception to toy aisle is, about 9 to 12 months, more pushing the full year. Meanwhile, a cartoon, a full 65 episode cartoon, takes a lot longer. So the two things are working in tandem, but also entirely separately on entirely different timelines. In the cartoons, Mara is essentially an assistant or an advisor to the mentor figure, Master Cebrian. She is in, kind of drab robes, a boring haircut. She's, the girlfriend character, very much so. There's nothing terribly exciting about her. There's nothing terribly toyetic about her. Meanwhile, at Mattel, while they were developing the New Adventures toy line and Wave 2, Errol McCarthy, who was sort of a famed artist who did a lot of the cardback art for the action figures of the original line, was asked to do a bunch of just new characters, concept art essentially. And I really hammer home concept art. These were sort of made as potential, they could sort of explore further on, but they weren't, set in stone. These were going to be action figures. Nevertheless, he did quite a few with a hero and a villain. They had a lot of pairing off villain rival kind of relationships going on, but they consider women action figures, and it's specifically one called Battle Woman, plus another character who had a whip, who is someone we will very likely get to in the future. Battle Woman specifically had, kind of more of a robotic look, but very importantly, this very long ponytail action. And that was definitely going to be the action figure, action feature. So we'll come back to her in a moment. Because cartoons take so much longer than toys, I think they were sort of really trucking along, making the cartoon ready for the big launch in 1989, 1990. What happened essentially is, I don't know the timeline. There's no real, evidence to suggest, what happened when. But I'm sort of guessing here is that when they started to develop the Mera action figure, they said, okay, we're going to take the Battle Woman gimmick, give it to her. We're going to give her this ponytail with a mace at the end. Somehow it's going to swing around and kill people. It's weird, but they were really, they really liked this concept. Meanwhile, in the cartoon, they were like, well, we're doing this Mousy Mera thing, so that's weird. I guess we're going to have to pivot. Literally at the 11th hour. This was the last 10 to 15 episodes of the series where Mera and Krita both had to have these different, costumes and whole different storylines to fit with the action figure. And that they did. Both women had to suddenly get a new costume, new fighting prowess, and became essentially queens of a little nation of, I want to say imp people. It was baffling and strange, but it did give them sort of a real boost. And again, a very toyetic look. Funnily enough, in the Battle Woman and other Mystery Woman line art, there were impish soldiers behind them. So again, a lot of this really did inform Jetlag's, imperative to make these things a thing. One last quick note on New Adventures. There is another secondary woman in the cast named Drissy. She's sort of the older sister of a shepherd. I don't know what the point of her was. I think maybe to be, the face and the voice of the people of Primus. She didn't really do that well in that regard. Her younger brother was supposed to be kind of like a preteen sidekick for He-Man. Likewise, he didn't really succeed in that regard. The two of them suck, frankly, and I'm not doing a separate video on it. If I don't like Mera, you better believe I don't like those two. Listen, I complain, but, there are fans of New Adventures, and the final verdict is pretty good. In 2016, as part of the Masters of the Universe Classics line, they did release a Mera action figure that was much more based on her original toy look, mixed with her cartoon look. She had, the long ponytail on with the mace on it. She had a sort of mace-bladed weapon. And admittedly, I had her for a little while before I sold that side of my collection. But one of the best women in that line, and I say that, reluctantly, but she was a little more posable, great color scheme, really fun figure. I'm sure she's expensive-ish now, but if you got the chance, I'd recommend it. Another oddity is that in the 2016 Netflix She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, Mera made a very strange and unexpected appearance. There was a woman named Mera, who none of us put two and two together, who was the original She-Ra, who preceded Adora. And once we found out what she looked like, she was a dead ringer for the New Adventures He-Man character. Nothing was really said much more beyond that. It was clearly she was from Primus, came to Etheria, became a She-Ra herself, but it was just a fun nod. As for any future Mera figures, you never know. Mattel is unabashedly pumping out Origins, pumping out Masterverse. So if I were to bet, they've been sort of dabbling in New Adventures in Origins more so I wouldn't be surprised to see a few of those characters in there, including Mera. Likewise, Masterverse, you never know. You just never know. Mattel is, full steam ahead, and so as they run out of women characters, she's one to do. And that's Mera, who I had to get out of the way so that I could do Krita. who I find more interesting because I like the villains more. I thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.